In Whispers of the Old Gods, we were introduced to 4 very powerful cards which were, well, old gods. We had Cthulhu, Yogg-Saron, Y'Shaarj, and N'Zoth. But the final versions that were released were not actually the only versions of all the old gods, and this video will showcase to you what these old gods could have been. And let me know what your favorite old god is. I think mine is Yogg-Saron. Yeah, I'll let him know. I just got a call from your mom, said that you're not subscribed. Excuse me? Like most Hearthstone cards, before they're actually released to play, they probably go through a lot of different designs until the team finds a design they actually really like. And especially when you have such a powerful effect like an old god, it could take multiple iterations to find an actual design that is healthy for the game and is also really fun. Starting off, let's look at Y'Shaarj. For those of you who don't know what Y'Shaarj is, it is a 10 mana 10/10 legendary minion. At the end of your turn, summon a random minion from your deck. Like all the other old gods, Y'Shaarj just went through a bunch of different concepts before they finally settled on the final design. The first design for the card saw any hero whose deck included Y'Shaarj replace the hero with Y'Shaarj itself, kind of like a start a game Lord Jaraxxus mixed with Genin Baku. If you ended up actually becoming Y'Shaarj at the start of the game, your hero was set to 15 life and you would get a brand new hero power. The hero power also went through a bunch of different designs, one including draw a card. If it's a minion, put it in play as a 1/1. When we compare this hero power to the Warlock hero power, you're not taking 2 damage, you get a card draw, and you also summon a 1/1 if it's a minion. That is really strong, even if you start the game at 15 life. Another version of this hero power was to make the next card played cost health instead of mana, but as you probably could imagine, this design saw players summoning high stat minions at the very start of the game. Imagine, it's turn 2, your opponent as Y'Shaarj uses their hero power, you're getting Alexstrasza on turn 2. Seems good. The only balancing side about this is that you started at 15 life, so if you did hero power a very strong minion, unless it gave you some kind of healing like Alexstrasza did, you were putting yourself in a very weird spot. Now, I think that this hero power could just be extremely polarizing. If you're going against a slower deck, this is obviously disgustingly broken, but if you're going against an aggressive deck, this is just absolutely useless. That effect was instead given to Cho'Gall, which is the Warlock legendary that was introduced in the same expansion. It's very easy to tell why the designers of this card stepped away from the insane amount of mana cheat that this could provide and went for a much more toned down version of the effect. And I think the effect they came up with was pretty good until they released Barnes, which had the way of just cheating this card out regardless. Next, we'll talk about Cthulhu, which saw the least amount of changes of all the old gods during its design process. And I just want to mention that I think Cthulhu's design and the way it was released is absolutely perfect. I think they did a very good job with this legendary. Even though the Cthulhu legendary card saw the least amount of changes, a lot of the cards relating to Cthulhu saw a ton of different design changes. One of the ideas they had was to make the lieutenant cards, for instance like the Ancient Shieldbearer, gain bonuses equal to Cthulhu's current stats when played. Ancient Shieldbearer has the battle cry, if your Cthulhu has at least 10 attack, gain 10 armor, but instead could have been battle cry, gain armor equal to Cthulhu's attack. The other really interesting concept that got removed from Cthulhu was that all the cards that had synergy with Cthulhu also had it with each other. For example, there were designs for cards that dealt 1 damage randomly for every Cthulhu related card that died this game, and another one that summoned tentacles for every Cthulhu related card that have died. Some of these concepts were really cool. It allowed Cthulhu decks not only to be a slower control oriented archetype, but it gave it the advantage of potentially being more of a mid-range deck if they went for that kind of concept. Now, because they gave Cthulhu away right at the beginning of the expansion, they probably wanted to make the card as accessible as possible for new players joining the game, so they went with a more basic concept, which I think is completely fine. The legendary is really well designed. Let's talk about Yogg-Saron, because this card went through a bunch of different iterations before finally reaching the version that we've seen in game. The very first design of Yogg-Saron was that it was a 10 mana 10/10 that made all your spells cost 1, but only gave you 15 seconds to take your turn for the rest of the game. In terms of Hearthstone design, this concept is crazy. Not only does it give you the Nozdormu effect of having a 15-second turn timer just for you as the player who casted Yogg, but it also means that all these huge spells are no longer random. They do exactly what they're told to do, but now at the cost of 1 mana. Now, I think the scariest part of this concept is not actually when Yogg first got released, but as Yogg was in rotation, we saw a lot of really spooky cards that could be really strong at 1 mana. Another design for Yogg was a 4 mana 8/8 with the text, when the game starts, gain 3 mana crystals, you can't gain more. This gave the player a very strong initial advantage, but with even a stronger disadvantage once the game got going. This design obviously led to pretty predictable games where the Yogg Saron player would basically be forced to play 4 mana minions because that was the maximum amount of mana they could have. Well, the opponent basically had to either A, try to out aggro them, which was almost impossible, or just completely remove all of their minions over and over again. The designers even tried varying the exact number of mana crystals that Yogg Saron would allow you to go up to, but ultimately decided that these games didn't feel particularly good and the whole design was scrapped. Another design for Yogg featured him as a 5 mana 10/10 with the text, when the game starts, Yogg Saron eats your mind, you only have 15 seconds each turn. This design was intended to provide a calculated risk, with the minion itself massively undercosted, allowing for very strong early game advantages in exchange for equally large reduction in the time available to make the optimal turn. This iteration was actually mainly rejected because of the technical limitations with the lag that would cause on Hearthstone. After going through a lot more iterations, the designers eventually settled on the basic idea that summoning Yogg Saron would cause it to cast a large number of spells based on the total number of spells the player has casted that game. The original version was a 10 mana 8/8, which rather than casting random spells, cast a copy of each spell the player had cast that game. While the targets were still chosen randomly, the control over which spells were cast allows the players to set up devastating 1-turn kills, potentially making it very uninteractive. With this specific design, Rogue had an insane advantage of getting infinite Yogg Sarons. Because they had Vanish in their set, they could play Vanish at any point in time in the game, play Yogg Saron would be vanished, and then they can keep on replaying Yogg Saron forever. That sounds fun. They eventually came up with the idea that we see with Yogg in its current form in Hearthstone, and that led to the results being less predictable, increased randomness, and it also led to a bunch of hilarious outcomes, which a lot of players really enjoyed. When it comes to N'Zoth, there was actually 0 changes to the card that were noted. It turned out N'Zoth was just a really well-designed card from the beginning. It had a very nice setup to it, and it was a very good finisher if your opponent couldn't deal with the board to follow up. N'Zoth's entire power level was designed around the fact that you needed death rattle minions to die, which could take an extreme amount of time, so there was no easy way to really cheat him out, no easy way to kind of cheat the effects. It was just a really nice design from the beginning. You could also tell that they were really happy with N'Zoth's design, because when they reintroduced the old gods in Manus at the Darkmoon Fair, N'Zoth's battle cry was virtually the exact same thing, but instead of death rattles, it was just for different tribes. Anyways, thanks for watching my video. If you like this one, go check out another. I'm sure you'll like it just as much, and you look fantastic, and I hope I see you tomorrow.